Okay, forward deployed engineers. Well, you could say second episode, but really our first on this vein. So I'll let you kick off because you basically know more about devs than I do. How do you see forward deployed engineers? What's it all about, mate? What's it all about?
So I mean, I'd say it's kind of not established, but semi emerging type of role that, but it was established primarily by the kind of Palantir model in terms of the nature of their work, and it's got an interesting hybrid aspect to it because it sits at an intersection across the business. And what's interesting about this role is you need to be very technical, but it's not necessarily a software engineering position. It's more than that, with respect to software engineers, in the sense that you are customer facing, so it's extremely client demanding. And I think that's an incredible add-on to someone so technical, because in the main, a lot of software engineers that I've known, no, don't get me wrong, there's some with some extremely solid communication skills, very, very confident presenters, etc. But in the main, a lot of software engineers like to either work in isolation or in pods and not have to deal with the shit, I suppose, that comes with the customer. Whereas these kind of forward deployed these new FDE roles, they are right in the eye of the storm with the customer. They're situated on site. They're dealing with very demanding expectations around this sort of stuff. You also have to have very, very solid product and workflow knowledge. So you have to understand the kind of purpose of the deployment piece, manage it back to the kind of code base back at base, and then work it around the customer deliverables, which also means one thing, Gary. It's extremely tangible about the value that you can bring, because I think you're literally sat in the house of the customer, seeing the work come to fruition, and they can kind of almost manage it. Track the progress in real time, and kind of look at that. And I think it's one of the most interesting positions that sort of came out of it. And whether you like Palantir or not, and I don't, I sit in that kind of latter camp. They have created this role and made it their own, and now it's duplicated and templated across so many different kind of enterprise customers, namely sort of OpenAI also do this as well. And it bodes really well for, I guess, telling you how the future of work may look at something that's traditional, like a software engineer, like a product manager, like a customer role, and how to mishmash this all together. And you need to really sort of increase your skill set in that sort of side. So yeah, it's definitely a huge role to kind of note upon. What's your views on it?
So I was trying to think of my kids hate my metaphors, by the way. Even more so, Masha hates it. But essentially, the metaphor I thought of literally 10 minutes ago was, as we're in a permanent state of war, it would seem, since World War II, even though we deny.
Yeah.
You can't win a war without boots on the ground. And so you can carpet bomb all you like. So without other than nuclear, obviously that's a bit different. But if we don't employ nuclear, you can't win a war without boots on the ground. And essentially, for the last 2.5 years, we've been in a kind of carpet bombing from Sam and Dario and Elon and whoever else of, man, AI is the best thing since sliced bread. Have a taste, toast it, do what you want with it. It's legendary. And that carpet bombing has worked to a certain point, but I kind of think it's petering out. People are starting to come up with backstories about Sam when he was 8 years old, and Dario and the whole military thing. There's all sorts of noise around other things other than, is the product good? We're starting to do ad hominem attacks on people. Is the personality of this person, which is completely irrelevant to the product. It's because people are running out of the product being just good enough, and it's not being implemented fast enough. So I think the FDE is the kind of Delta Force boots on the ground. To take this territory, we are going to need boots on the ground, and we're going to need like crack resources. We're willing to pay them whatever. There's going to be a few casualties of war, but we need boots on the ground, airborne division, 101st, going in and cracking this stuff, almost like in the old days, whether it be the Murex implementation or the IBM guys or some fraction of the McKinsey guys or whatever that could actually bring it in dead or alive. I think that's where we are. And the FDE's kind of shown that. And Palantir were doing okay, but it was struggling until the AI piece came along because the system's pretty complicated. Any system's complicated.
Yep.
Like even Salesforce, which is let's be fair, a database of like addresses, is complicated to put in. But Palantir is probably 2 orders of magnitude more complicated. And they were just struggling because technology, I believe, is good. We might not like the politics, but technology, from what I understand, has been down the rabbit hole, seems very good. But it was just too complex to put in, to manage, to hand over. And that's why the FDE had to be born, because it's something you couldn't just give it to someone and put it in like we did with SAP or whatever and just allow a bit of suboptimality. You had to really have like crack groups pretty much taking a territory and managing it. And so the FDE makes sense because it's not just for any kind of project manager or product manager. It really needs crack engineers and crack people, as you say, with superb McKinsey-esque kind of political and kind of communication skills. That's
I think you're right. Well, and because the complexity of like a product and technology piece like a Palantir means that like anything you introduce new, right? Particularly when it's data sensitivity in this sort of climate with AI, etc., you need to have trust. And the best way to do that is to garner it from specialists that you can see, touch, and understand and work with. So that's why these kind of roles get formed around, but it extends itself from the kind of traditional consultancy model because, consultants come in, create a beautiful report or an assessment or an audit of your current situation. But these guys are very solutions based, and triaging problems.
Yes.
And really sort of understanding how their particular product can then engineer it in a bespoke fashion, I think is extremely powerful. And it just and do you think Gary it'll change the expectations of you as a customer as well, because of this?
I think so. I can't remember the exact way. I'm reading up a guy, I think his name's Sundeep something, and he was just saying that I suppose in your world, basically, you would have come across engineers with, I don't know, 3 or 4 programming skills. I imagine, just make it up. C plus SQL plus, say, Python plus, I don't know, Rust or maybe nowadays. And so they'd be able to apply those skills to any firm. So it's one engineer or one skill set to kind of many different companies, with whoever you can get them a job with at the highest salary. And I think what he was saying is where you've gone from kind of one skill set to many companies, anybody wants Rust and C++ and Python, etc., to kind of the platform or one company and many different skills. So as you said earlier, you started off with that person now needs to have IBM skills, McKinsey-esque kind of political skills and presentational skills, plus be kind of a Databricks like legend, plus be a kind of 10x engineer with like let's just say front end Node or whatever, React. Plus he can do some like ML stuff. Plus just general Apache Spark. Plus he can do the basic Python stuff. Plus he can present. I mean, that guy's like rock and roll or girl, basically. So we're talking like Mick Jagger now, as opposed to where you could play someone at a very high salary with those 3 or 4 programming skills before. Now as you say, the salaries are kind of like 200-ish, can be up to like 500K, because you're looking for Mick Jagger. Essentially, he can dance, he can sing, he can write, he can do everything. And that's why you could see, well, it makes sense, because rather than man having this really tightly kind of spec-ish project or product that you would have got, say, one of the big 4 or McKinsey, etc., in to do, now you just say, look, come in and root around, see what you find, man. Just, you've got 6 months, we'll pay you like 2.5 million or whatever to your company. You've got a good margin in there. Just root around and see what you find and put some stuff together. Give us some POCs and present them, and we'll pick one out of 6 or 7 or 10, and happy days. It's very different.
What we're seeing with this stuff as well is because some of the findings, as I understand it, is that the takeaways and the learns, not the specifics to the customer, can be then funneled back to base as well, and be used as a kind of a learning model for other customers as well. So it's an interesting kind of flywheel that's been established there. And there's tremendous insight always to be gained working on site. I mean, if I think about it from my sort of talent background, when MSPs and RPOs got introduced, and you're able to sort of sit physically with the business, not just with the HR or people function, but actually with people like yourself in the kind of finance world, operations, front office, all that sort of stuff. If it's a bank, right? Having that kind of detailed understanding makes you better prepared for what's next, and you learn so much more to enable you to pitch to the next sort of customer that's maybe a competitor of yours. So I think it's an interesting flywheel that's come about. It's a like metaphors, as you say, boots on the ground. It's got a Trojan horse element to it. It's got so many different sort of aspects to it that makes it and obviously the pay, right, makes it such an attractive role. But I think you need to be a certain type of personality to do it, because not only have you got to be technically and engaged and smart and all that sort of stuff, but you've got to deal with the friction, the difficulties of this sort of stuff, and it'd be interesting to sort of see what how this whether it pays off, whether you establish consultancies even that are these kind of individuals. So the future of work on that sort of side certainly is geared towards this as one of the markers.
So I think you raised the biggest opportunity there. So I was doing so if we take the kind of career capitalist mentality, and you say, okay, looking on LinkedIn, did a bit of Google search, did a bit of messing about on LLMs, and general, they reckon there's about 5,000-ish, maybe to 9,000, but just say 5,000 people employed as FTEs now.
Wow.
And then they say there's as many as 2,500 jobs on offer currently. Some of them probably ghost, but even if half a ghost, okay, it's probably about 1,000+ jobs out there. But as you say, man, there's a huge gap between being kind of an infantry soldier. I'm going to really, really milk this metaphor, by the way, so you're going to have to stop that way. Between an infantry soldier and being, I don't know, part of like the crack Marine squad or whatever. Or whatever the new Delta Force or 101st Airborne, or whatever they're called. And so there's a gap. And that could be years. I don't know what the training is for those, because I know something about the army, but it could be years. It could be all Green Berets. It could be months. It could be, but there's a gap. And the question is, who is going to fill that gap? And that gap is kind of, as you say, where the opportunity is. Is it like the kind of Murex consultancies that sprung up in the kind of late 90s, early noughties that said that they had this kind of graduate all the way up, and they would go to different clients and you might be embedded, and they would train people and they would expand kind of very slowly compared to even other consultancies like the Excellians, etc. and software. They expanded very slowly compared to like Big Four, which is bang, let's have like 10,000 people and get them working. And so there's a gap in, and that's why I see the opportunity, say kind of digital agencies, of how do you get that pipeline? I think, and this is my punt, if we're doing venture capital, career capital, that, okay, say there's like 5,000 people employed, another 1,000 roles outstanding, so say 6,000. I reckon it can go to 30,000 plus, maybe even 50,000. So it's probably 5x, maybe even to 10x growth in the number of people that you would need in 10 years' time, say. So you're saying, okay, well, that's probably make it about 7, 8 billion, 10 billion market in terms of what they're being paid. That's a lot of money to be spread around in terms of individual salaries and obviously agencies that can come in over the top. And if you take what Palantir have done, Palantir did something kind of by accident, maybe on purpose, but by accident from what I understood, is the way that I can get you invested as a client and get you kind of sucked in is to kind of map your data to something else. Once you've mapped it like 2.5 years, it's a ball ache to pull out. And it's almost like your career being pulled out of the company. If you're saying, you know what, yeah, we've mapped it for 2.5 years, but we're going to bin that. No CIO, CTO does that. And so by mapping it to a kind of layer above the database, the Snowflakes, the Databricks, the kind of Oracles, whatever the Postgres database is, to this ontological layer, it's very hard to rip out. And people are saying it now about NHS, is that it may, whether you like the politics or not, and I'm not a huge fan of their politics either, and the manifestos and all the other crazy shit. But once you map your data to that level above your database, it's very, very hard to rip out, because someone's saying, I've basically done a Rosetta Stone for Man and Gary, who speak different languages, and Jimmy and Jane and Jemima, and we're going to rip that Rosetta Stone out. Yeah, it's very difficult, man.
Yeah, it is. Once they get the clause in there, but also it comes back to the point I was trying to make, where I think what's interesting about these roles is that you can see, because technology, you can almost touch and feel it, and when you then apply it to a pain point that a customer is experiencing, to a specific workflow that they want the demand to, they can see that value.
Yeah,
it's very hard to then turn around and say we don't need these people. It becomes a situation where this is why Palantir have experienced the growth that they do, because they're able to sort of put people in there that effectively, are digging trenches, man. They are setting up camp and base there, and starting to eat with the locals and doing all that sort of stuff, right? And what they end up building, mate, is a very solid understanding of that culture and a real deep understanding of their stakeholders. And this is what it comes down to. I think the opportunity does sit there, but the type of person that can go in and do this is, I don't know how they've managed to find as many as they have, right? Or that, and I'm sure the demand will increase because it is so difficult to find someone that can sit in that hybrid of not only one or two things, but three or four things, and do them extremely well. Well, you don't need to be the best coder, but you need to be technically gifted in a different way to be adaptable. Like you think about the ambiguity of some of these environments, like you're talking about, because they've got a state, you need to move it to this, and whether you're mapping that ontology layer on that sort of stuff, you've got to have the capable mind to understand a setup, be it good or bad, and then have the confidence to go, this is how we're going to move this over. And if it's a technically complex solution, able to distill that down into a very simple way that a non-technical person back at that company can understand. I think there's so many strands to this area, and that's why people will look at these salaries and go, "Oh, are you kidding me?" It's like footballer wages. It's less than footballer wages. That's the mad thing about it. But the intrinsic value that I think you can deliver as these individuals is tremendous. It can be tremendous. So it'd be interesting to sort of see whether you get these consultancies set up, what these people go on to go and do. Because you're going to experience burnout as well, man. If you get pulled from pillar to post, travel all the time, etc. And Gary, the thing that I think we may miss on this as well is you're not just industry aligned. One day you're talking to something in the health sector, the next day you're talking logistics. You got to be able to navigate, and I think that demands a certain type of person that can go and do that. When it first sort of came out, I read it because I was like, I was really interested, and I realized obviously quickly I couldn't do this job because I don't have the technical capability of it, or this, that, and the other, right? But you look at it and go, wow, this is a meaty job. Meaty role as to what they're doing, and it was always one where you want to go, I want to see how this sort of develops. So, and I kind of parked it in my mental car park until you brought it up with me the other day. I was like, actually, it'd be interesting to sort of see the numbers, and with the things you've just been sprouting out there, I'm going, wow, incredible. It's incredible.
I think you nailed it in the first kind of introduction where you said it kind of needs someone who's able to explain stuff but also technical. And you think about that background and where we've come from in the last 20 years, we have kind of the very technical but also very what's the word I'd use, very smart communicators whether it be at Google or Facebook Meta or basically Microsoft, who basically got an engineering background, really conversant engineering, or even Elon, maybe not articulate, but conversant in engineering, but are able to have this public persona and be a person. And I have this theory, which again my wife hates, which is look at areas where someone can start a podcast. She's like, what's he talking about? And we've got this kind of, this is going off at a tangent as always, this FP&A thing, which is financial planning and analysis in finance, who have been kind of the rock stars of finance in the last 10 years. They're kind of taken over the CFO. CFOs used to be CPAs, chartered accountants, and now they're FP&A, which is kind of much more metric, but also very, very good at politics and talking and communication. And in many ways, the founders that have made it forward are the ones that don't just do engineering, because there's loads of people that do very good engineering, 10x or whatever, 100x, whatever they call it, but the ones that are able to articulate it. And then I think even further, the ones that will be able to start a podcast or be really good on a Duarkesh podcast or some other podcast, Stratechery or whatever. And you think, okay, wait a minute, these guys are all like, Mark Zuckerberg can like switch from doing like MMA wrestling to doing surfing to doing Mandarin to talking about pretty deep engineering, not loved by every engineer, but deep enough, more than the average person. And I think you nailed it. That's the kind of person. The person that, okay, isn't going to start Facebook or Meta, isn't going to start Google, but actually, I'm as good as Mark, but I just haven't got the money or the opportunity or the network. But yeah, but I see myself as a founder, leaving university or whatever, or even pre-university. And I think we have to question how many of those are there. Y Combinator tells us there's thousands of them, because those are thousands of people who apply to Y Combinator. And most of the ideas don't work, but they are very good at communication and pretty good engineers. And I think that's the kind of Peter Thiel Founders Fund. I'm taking you out of university because, yeah, you could spend 3 years learning something, but I don't even want that. I'm just going to just give you 100 grand and Bob's your uncle, man. You go off and create some random company and, yeah, 1 out of 20 will work.
Yeah, and I think on that point, look, for instance, if you go back to these kind of FDEs, that skill set that we've been kind of waxing lyrical about is perfect for entrepreneurial kind of vocation, right? And it'd be fascinating to see how many of these individuals that might experience kind of like fatigue of working for a Palantir or an OpenAI doing this kind of job, and actually go, do you know what? I've got the domain expertise across many domains now. I've got specific industry expertise. I've got great communication. I've got a brilliant mind for this sort of stuff. And if they add the bravery into that kind of mixture in the chemistry set, whether they venture out and do their own thing because they've got that skill set. And I think this leads to a broader point, on two notes. I listen to a lot of Steve Bartlett podcasts and Diary of a CEO because he's got such a good variety of guests. And Dan Priestley, he's had on a couple of times, the Australian entrepreneur. Yeah. And he's obviously found a formula that works for him. And so he's forever, like a Simon Squid, banging the drum about, come on. Everybody needs to start their own business, chase your dream, all that sort of good stuff. And then you've got like Andrej I'm going to say his name wrong, Karpathy, the OpenAI Tesla guy, right? Who said this, right? The new language of coding is English. That's the most important language to learn. I've just kind of kiboshed his quote there, but I think you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Now, as all these things come into play, where you've got the blueprint skill set of technical communication. If you've got a bit of bravery and you've got an idea, then you're able to, and now the landscape is kind of ushering you, encouraging you to go out and do your own thing with support, etc. And obviously with AI tools, whether you're vibe coding or doing marketing with it, etc. And all you've got to do is be able to articulate what's in your head onto these platforms. I think it sets up this other kind of strand for these things where you kind of earn your stripes doing these kind of roles to build up that expertise. For any young person that listens to this, that's the kind of thing you want to do, where you build up. I wish someone had told me this, mate. Learn these things, and then the world is set up in this particular way because you need the experience to understand what the problems are, what challenges are, to identify a solution. And unless you're lucky enough already to have experienced the problem so irritating to you that you've gone, it doesn't matter about learning all this sort of stuff in industry. I'm going to go solve it now.
Yeah.
I think we're moving towards that area where talk about capital. I wouldn't be surprised, mate, if the number one job in the next 5-10 years is entrepreneur. Everybody becomes that way inclined. I mean, I'll wrap up in a sec. You see the number of companies that look for entrepreneur in residence, because they want that skill set.
Yeah. But to that point, I suppose you could argue that the schooling system doesn't actually teach that.
Oh, no.
And if you take the kind of, as you said, about the ontology of the Palantir, so whether or not we agree with the politics or the kind of technocratism or whatever people call it, technocracy or authoritarianism, you have to say that he's made people look at things in a different way. So I went down an ontology rabbit hole and what it means, how many people have been using it and stuff. And I tried to create one many years ago for monetization. I wanted the name that no one uses, so I called it monetization ontology, which is how things fit together. And even if they taught that, absent Palantir, and said, actually, we need to think of everything in 3D, then that is a very different skill set than kind of the 2D programming. If I take an example, right, I live at the bottom of a hill, but at the bottom of Muswell Hill, it's Crouch End, but at the bottom of Muswell Hill. And there's only really 3 ways in. One from Wood Green, one from Muswell Hill, and the other one basically from Finsbury Park. There's only 3 ways in, so it comes converging. So if you close one of those, there's only 2 ways in. So pretty much. It doesn't take much math to work out. There's only 3 ways into the valley. If you close one of those entrances into the valley, then there's only 2. And then if you kind of half close another part, you're in trouble. And so when I was listening to the various podcasts, and not that many about they explain the ontology, some of them Palantir, and they're quite dry. Essentially, he's saying, how do we create digital twins for everything? And how do we move things into kind of objects and say objects around? So in this scenario, I suppose, you could map the kind of, you could argue the roads into some sort of ontology, and then you could have certain objects being roads and the avenues that come in. And you would say, okay, well, what happens if I close one of the avenues? Well, obviously, all the traffic, so I don't know, say 100,000 cars a day, it's going to move to 2. So rather than 30,000, 33,000, you're going to have 50,000. And at peak times, you're going to be in a world of pain, basically. And you can see that flow. And it maybe the better example would be, because that's a pretty rubbish example, would be, imagine if we had Google Maps for every single part of your work, man. And because Google Maps, you're walking past the place and say, hey man, have a look at here. We've got some, I don't know, martinis, or we've got a good Negroni next door, or we've got a really good pizza in where I live. Why don't you go and check it out? And it will tell you the prices, tell you runs it, it'll show you some pictures. So that is essentially digital twinning you by saying, well, we're actually tracking you, mate, and we can see where you are. And similarly with GPS, it's kind of digital twinning you of an object. So imagine that on mass, where basically everybody, which Google is already, watching us basically move around with a car, which actually is, because that's how it tells traffic. That's what they've been able to do. And say in a company, it would be, well, how does this data flow around? Or how does that PowerPoint flow around? Or how does that person even move around the building? So it's digital twinning most of the elements of the workflows, almost as an organism. And that kind of teaching, people haven't got past the politics and the kind of techno-authoritarianism that people say, to say, what has he actually thought about and created that makes us think about data in a different way? That was a little bit of a long spiel there. Apologies.
No, it makes it perfectly understandable, and then you get into a quandary on a moral point of view, right? Whether, look, I always say this, right? Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And what's interesting about this situation is that they've got this capability now, and with this capability, they've been able to harness it into creating products that can be done to, broadly speaking, in very simple terms, for good or for bad. And and when you can do either things, it becomes an issue. Now, notwithstanding, because I don't want to get into a big question about moral,
Yeah.
standings and all this sort of stuff. We all know how we feel about certain things. But what is interesting is that there's a lot of AI bubble talk, right? As we all know,
Yeah.
and it'll never go away because for XYZ reason. But one of the big concerns in the industry, certainly in the West, is that we're running out of data.
Mm-hmm.
And effectively has all the data on the internet being consumed by these massive language models, right? I'm sure we touched upon it previously. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the future about data annotation, all those kind of like Mercor of this world and data annotation roles that sort of exist, where they're trying to create more and more and more data for these models to consume so they can be improved, etc. You take that Palantir opportunity that exists in terms of mapping out user behavior in a very unique, organistic point of view in a company. That's not available at the moment for those models. If you transfer that into that, what could that create? In China, why those models let's take something that everybody understands, which is video rendering, right? Why things like Cdance is so much better, why Sora decided to kill it.
Tell me about it. I've used it.
Right?
Yeah.
It's because their ecosystem is, I'm not saying this is a good thing, by the way, but I'm just giving you a reason why their models are so strong. It's because they are able, when someone takes a video and blogs, vlogs, whatever it is about their world, their life, etc., all the settings within the camera is shared to a hub that is then consumed for these large language models. And because it's state kind of occupied, it's state owned, it's state positioned, while ByteDance may own the LLM, they still have to answer to Z, and the party to go, what are we doing with this sort of stuff? So that's why when you look at some of the mock-it, I'm sure you might have seen that viral video between Brad Pitt fighting Tom Cruise, right?
Yeah.
Look at the angles, the movement, fluid. Nothing, no Mid-Journey, no Leonardo, no Sora. I mean, Sora's gone. Nothing in created by these major blue chip models is going to compete with that, because they just don't have those kind of settings, So going back to your point, to circle back round, they've created this ontology, this unique ability to basically break down so many data points that is now at this crossroads where actually should we apply it to this data set, and then feed it back into the LLMs? And it's always this question, isn't it? Just because we can, should we? And the carrot and the stick is always China, isn't it? It's always the competitor, because if we don't, someone else is going to do it. It's a matter of time, Gary. It's a matter of time.
Totally, man. But say if I was an engineer in a kind of big bank or big firm or whatever, as we'll see with the next crisis, which I think is less than 18 months away, whether it be private credit, private equity, or something, or basically the debt stack on top of AI, one of those crises. And what will transpire that we haven't really ever mapped things together, man. So there are still pockets of information that no one knows about. There were obviously pockets in 2006 and 7 and 8. And now the pockets are, well, actually, we just basically don't have the actual loan in our books in banks. We've syndicated it on 2, 3, 4 levels. And Meta is the best example of that. There is no rational reason why Meta would borrow off balance sheet, other than the fact that they know that piecing information together requires a certain sort of research skill and a certain type of analyst skill that, you're going to have analysts putting together, but it's still almost one derivative away from clarity. And you can multiply that across many different banks, many different financial services, because it's really hard to put it together. And so what the ontology and Palantir and that kind of thinking brings together is actually, we can map all this like GPS. Everything's mappable. And, or you say in China, where they can even see you when you've got a balaclava on, apparently, and stuff like that. So you think, okay, this is going to be big, whether we like it or not. It's going to be big, and therefore there is this massive opportunity for people to leave university or to be 2-3 years in their career of full stack dev and say, okay, I need to hard pivot over the next year. How do I basically hard pivot? And I think you nailed it. There's, I don't know, millions of engineers, probably at least say 500,000 top engineers in the world. Only 1% of them could make it to kind of founder status because they have the communication layer and they have the ability to weave in metaphors, analogies, history, philosophy, psychology, and all the other things that good founders are really, really able to do. And I think they can learn more engineering, more ML and Python and Node.js and all the other stuff. But I think you've nailed it. The most important skill is how do you take that and go from the 5 million, 500,000 down to the 5 to 50,000 of actually, I'm able to take this complex kind of understanding of this particular entity that I've been sitting in for a month, at least 2 months, 3 months, and translate it into a value prop that I can verbally explain to someone and is super, super clear. And I think that skill, I don't know if that's being taught anywhere.
No, I mean, I did a workshop with a bunch of grads, early careers individuals last week over at Silverstone with the Aston Martin F1 team, and these are super bright kids, Gary. I mean, I walked into the room, I'm easily the dumbest guy in there, right? And they are gifted, super analytical, academically gifted. But it was interesting, as we talked about things, none of them have ever experienced or had the benefit of. I'm not just talking about me, but anybody that does what I do in terms of going in there to make them understand and decipher a few things. One is what is their value in the sense of not what have they done, but what are they very good at, right?
Yeah.
So and long story short, we were talking about simple things like communication. Everybody's got project work and stuff like that. And communication was so interesting to say. And I was like, so everybody will write down, I'm a great communicator. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Yeah. What makes you an effective communicator? And it all came down to one kind of unique point when we kind of fed into it, which was the best communicators are the ones that can take complex, difficult to understand subject matter, like they do in engineering, right? And then meet someone who's a non-engineer and explain it to them. And if you translate that and extrapolate that into the world that we kind of work in, whether you're networking, where you're giving your elevator pitch, very succinctly, effectively take, you could be doing something, you've got a lot of fingers in a lot of the pies, right? But if you meet someone for the first time and they go, I have no idea who Gary Bailey is, but you're able to explain to them very quickly and they understand it, what it is, 1, 2, 3 that you're doing, that's a gift. That's really powerful because they can walk away and go, actually, I could use Gary in this, or I could refer Gary to that, right? In an interview, same thing. Explain who you are, whatever it might be. And also in your kind of elevator pitch about your business. What is, because that inspires people, that galvanizes people.
Yeah.
I've been on the circuit a lot where you go to these kind of like pitch days, grad day, whatever it might be, right? Different kind of mirror. It's the same thing every time. How do you explain something to someone who has no idea about it and they leave being either completely, they've got a great comprehension of what you do, inspired to invest, or they back you or they'll recommend you? That's the gift. And you're right. They don't teach you that at the school, man. And they should. This should be absolutely taught, like how to convey your value or the value of the business or whatever it might be to someone that you've never met, and for them to walk away with those kind of reactions. That's the gift. That's the skill set I think that should be is massively undersold, mate. And those kids were all saying it, going, geez, no one ever teaches us this stuff, I
suppose, because it's so I won't say amorphous, but it's nebulous. You can't really get your hands on it, and you can't
That's true.
easily test it. And so in many ways, there's a lot of people beating up marketing. And marketing is one of the most precarious kind of C-suite jobs. And you're like, why is it so precarious? And I think in terms of like the average lifespan being 2.25 years, sometimes less than that, they're kind of like 100 million revenue level. You're like, why is this such huge turnover? And I think it's because it's almost like watching Mad Men. And I was saying to someone yesterday, but basically they were talking about Mad Men, and I was saying, oh, you want to be Roger Sterling, whatever, the guy that takes people out, gets them drunk and all sorts of like stuff. They're like, Well, I don't actually want to be. Well, yeah, you do, because that's it. You either want to be the account manager or want to be the creative. Unless you're Don Draper, the
Yeah.
creative don't get paid as much. The Peggy, than if you don't get paid as much because their ideas seem a dime a dozen to a penny, and they're not because they're massive creative. And someone was talking about the Apple transition yesterday, and what's his name's leaving and giving it to an engineering guy, which is cool, or kind of a hardware guy, which is
Yeah,
cool.
hardware.
A hardware company, we
Yep.
want to work, but they were saying that can only happen after you've had the creative guy. You've had the creative guy 20 years ago, and he created this thing, and obviously you can milk it for kind of ever. To be honest, because it's like Coca-Cola, you can milk Coca-Cola forever, but someone was creative coming up with that and swooshed, etc. Similarly with Nike. And I suppose, are we now at the kind of milking level, which I didn't think we were? We're at the kind of, as they say, taking the territory level before we work out how to extract value out of that territory, that colony. We're still taking the territory, bedding people down, as you say, putting the army bases, creating the infrastructure, building railways, doing whatever we need to do. We're still at the taking of territory, which unfortunately needs a bit of aggro, but also needs a bit of creation. And that isn't something schools are really set up to teach, because one, it's kind of like, well, how do you judge creativity? Art, even art, when I've seen what the teachers talk about, and they're lovely teachers, but it's very kind of still personality driven. What makes your art better than mine? Kind of, is it what people are paid for it? Maybe that's one vector. Is it what people appreciate, what people imbibe? There's no way of telling why your art is more valuable than ours. So we use monetary value and a kind of like a little bit of snobbery, but there aren't really good indicators of what makes your art better than mine. And that's why, in a kind of cultural teaching perspective, which we're in, it's very hard to judge until you put it out there.
Yeah, and it is. Obviously, marketing, advertising is so. Go about this in a different way, right? So, my touch points with things like marketing and advertising is that when I went to university with a really good mate of mine who did the same degree as me. We both did environmental studies, and he ended up getting a job as a someone quite low level, I guess, at the time, entry level position in a big kind of mid level marketing company, advertising company in town, and he worked all the way up, acquisitions, all that sort of stuff, and he became CEO. He ended up becoming CEO of that firm. Now, when he left them, he just got burnt out, right? But he did really well out of that financially, and he is able to sort of take the expertise of the creative element. And what he learned from the creative element is also the BS that comes with product launches, product descriptions, and he's able to sort of see through that. And he's able to twist it, spin it. He's got a great gift of the gab. His unique skill is that he is able to take complex stuff and translate it into a very, like, he was onto Uber before I even knew what Uber was, right? He was able to go, this is what's going to happen. This is for the situation. And he's always been at the forefront of so many different things because of the nature of the world that they work in. My point is, when I was growing up, I really didn't see the value of advertising or marketing. But now that I've been through a couple businesses, small ones, etc. I mean, other than your sales, your products, and obviously if you've got an engineering element to your product and business, etc., marketing's right there, because without it, you can't grow. And I think people that come from that background, I'm using my mate as a very good example. I mean, he's a bit of a unique individual because he became the CEO, but having met other people in those kind of industries, they're so well rounded, Gary. Because their creative element to it, And to your point, it's very difficult to get around the table to talk about it sometimes because it's to taste, whether you're an effective marketer or a creator. Someone always has an opinion on something, right? Oh, I don't like that color, or that's a wrong image, or this, that, the other, right? But they're not focusing on the messaging in the sense of, actually, this was the brief, right? A huge brief, right? This is the audience. Look at all this data. And then they are able to translate into one image with one slogan. You know what I mean? And how difficult is that? That is a gift, in my opinion,
Totally, mate. It's basically a couple of things that based on what you said there, there's, as I say, I've been for the last 3 years thinking CMO, why is the chief marketing officer struggling? And then I maybe thought exactly what you said there. Maybe marketing is becoming more valuable but more diffused, in that everybody's now a marketer. Man's
Yes.
marketing,
Well,
he's
they think they are anyway. Yeah.
well, they have to be, because, as you say, the CV kind of apocalypse via the ATS means everybody has to find a different way of marketing. It could be kind of nepotism, it could be friend circle, it could be standing outside Liverpool Street Station with a banner. Doesn't matter how, but you're marketing, and that worked actually for that guy.
True. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
marketing. It's all marketing, and you're mixing. I suppose that you could argue that the FDE is mixing the Roger Sterling kind of nuance, the McKinsey nuance, or whatever, with the kind of Don Draper creativity. And the guy I came across, I've been trying to find out, because I think I spoke to you the other day about, my son came back and he's doing, I can't remember which course it is, it might be geography. And they went to Iceland the other day for a school trip for a few days. And he
Nice.
was saying, "Oh, do you know that the UK produces like 60% of the energy grid is like renewables?" I'm like, "No, that's nonsense. What are you talking about? 60% of our?" He goes, "No, it's about 60%." And I think he was slightly off. It was like 50% or something. But we don't have any.
Still a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, but basically, because we hadn't invested, we've got nowhere to store it. So it'll produce, like today could be quite windy, and it's got no way to store it. And we don't know what reactions came on. And we basically have this thing which I couldn't really articulate as well until I saw a guy on TikTok. And this guy with a woolly jumper, and I put it, basically took his picture and put it through Google Gemini and said, "Oh, how explain this culturally, what this guy's saying." That's my new angle, culturally. And it said basically the guy in a woolly jumper on TikTok explaining merit order pricing. And the merit order pricing goes from kind of the renewables like coal. Then the next amount up would be nuclear. Then it goes up to gas. And it basically says we price at the highest unit of marginal delivery. So say like we needed 99% or 100% obviously energy, but basically gas only produced 1%, we would price at the 1%, because that we need 100% for the whole grid, and we would price
I
at
see.
the highest amount. So I think it's called merit order pricing. Some people call it parity pricing. There's all sorts of like economic BS names which the ordinary person couldn't understand. Whereas in reality, it said basically we price at the highest price is an easy way to say it. So if you said that walking down the street, we price your energy, EDS, whatever, at the highest price, they'd be like, what are you talking about? What about the highest price rather than the average price or the median price or whatever you want to call it? And so this guy in a woolly jumper was able to pierce through all the complexity of the off-gem and this and that, and even, what's that guy's name, who's Martin Lewis, who's brilliant, super articulate. And I'm sure he's explained it in a way, but not as simple as the guy in the woolly jumper who said, "This is a graph and we price at the highest price." And what that means is that if man's running octopus, yeah, he gets a higher price, which means he's going to reinvest the money and then create even more renewables, which we still can't store. So that's why they've gone from a low percentage to a high percentage, but we still can't store it because as a country, we're not willing to invest, or the government, in more storage and means of moving it around. And so the government's being pushed because of the people with the woolly jumpers. Zach Polanski's also very good at explaining this, to actually say, maybe we shouldn't price at the highest marginal price. We've done it since 1996, but maybe we shouldn't. And if we don't, man, it saves the average bill about 400 quid, 300 to 400 quid, they reckon. Bigger bills,
Which is
500.
massive.
It's massive in these times.
Yeah.
And only it's been forced because I think marketing has been so diffuse that you get the guy in the woolly jumper on TikTok able to pierce through, only get 10,000 likes, but that's probably 100,000 views. That's 100,000 people that kind of think, wait a minute, I'm pricing this at the highest price. And I kind of think of a metaphor just to finish the monologue. I'm thinking, imagine we need proteins for energy and stuff. So imagine, man, You got your chicken at about, I don't know, £4 for cheap chicken, maybe £10 for a kind of organic chicken per kilo. You got your steak at about £30 a kilo. You got your pork at about £7 a kilo. Imagine if you walked in and you bought some chicken, 1 kilo chicken, 1 kilo pork, 1 kilo of steak. And they said, you know what, man? Okay, cool. That is going to be 90 quid. You went, well, what the hell's going on? Well, we're pricing all your protein at the highest marginal rate. You'd be like, get out of here, son. But no one converts it into that. Because you'll say, no, I'm expecting to pay, £5, £10 for good chicken, and then £7 for good pork, and then blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, I expect a mixed basket of pricing. No, they're going to price all of your proteins at the 30 quid per kilo.
And it's interesting because now once that jargon has been distillated down and into a snapshot, because if it's on TikTok, it's a short, right? So it's less than a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes tops of communication.
Yeah.
That you're able to sort of decipher, understand, and then apply it into your own thinking. That's the power of, not only advertising, marketing, but the ability as we go on about taking complex stuff and distilling it down into an understandable piece of information. One of the guys that I see online a lot, right, he's a very political guy. He's a comedian, I think, or he's certainly a social media comedian, where he goes, you've got questions around the Iran war or the Strait of Hormuz, but you don't want to look like a ficky dum-dum in front of your mates. That's his entire pattern before he gets into it. Right, and some of it's condescending and patronising, but it's meant to be. It's meant to be, because what he's trying to do is take something sensitive, difficult, and break it down into very bite-sized, understandable chunks. And it's memorable because he's saying the words out loud, right? The elephant in the room. So many people, dude, don't put their hands up in meetings or whatever it might be because they don't want to look stupid. It's as simple as that, right? Whereas I'm telling you, there's so many questions. I honestly give some stuff sometimes, and I listen to these talks, right? And I'm like, I can't be the only person raising my hand here and not understanding what's going on here, But people don't, because they're fearful of, actually, I don't want to look like I don't know what's going on here. I'm writing a company resource thing at the moment for AI procurement. Okay, procurement of AI software, particularly when it comes to hiring talent. Yeah. And the underlying message, quite simply, Gary, is this, right? When I was going through the kind of persona, people that buy this are the ones that don't want to seem like they don't understand things in the AI and technical world. It's quite simple, really. That's there's more dimensions to it. But a main spearhead that I find about the persona, when I've kind of interviewed people and shortlisted the kind of attributes, it's that they're fearful of, actually, my job is to buy things, right? Any kind of myriad for the business when it comes to technology and AI. But because it's so forefront, mate, there's so many conditions to sort of think about. The EU laws that are coming into play, are they on top of all these different things? Probably not. Yeah. So they don't want to look stupid in front of their mates, so they just go, I'm just going to get on with it, right? It's the same thing, man. How do we enable people in whatever job we do to take very difficult things, to explain it into very simple, bite-sized things? Mate, whenever I ask AI anything, I am 7 years old. My brain is 7 years old.
No, it's a good way to think about it. No, it is that, and that analogy stuff and the metaphors and bringing in history, I suppose, is something. And then you kind of learn a bit of how to write stuff in school and pre-C and that sort of stuff, but not in the same way. And for the FDE, I'm thinking the opportunities are so massive, but the skill sets kind of need a kind of maybe not even 3 to 6 month conversion post university or post A levels or whatever it is in this country. And it would take someone off at such an uncomfortable tangent. And it'd be almost like, how do you start a podcast on this or a piece of writing? And so I think I told you last time, my theory of when I speak to students and they completely ignore me most of the time and say, oh, how do I get a job? Sometimes people hit me up on LinkedIn and say, oh, I got a job in banking or whatever. I say, just start writing about banking. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I goes, well, look, there's shards of information everywhere. I mean, like, You put one query in, and whether it be the LLMs or Google News or whatever, there's loads of information, Google Alerts, that you can just condense into something meaningful. And if you add focus to that and say, I'm only going to write about Bank of America, I'm only going to write about Bank of, it could be Bank of England, could be JP Morgan, etc., then you've got focus. But then you have to somehow turn it into memeable information. And there's one kind of creator I follow who's really good at economics, and her name's Kyla Scannon. I think it's Kyla Scannon. So she's like, actually, there's two. There's one that's a bit more dry, but she's still quite funny in a sarcastic way, who's like a proper PhD type thing. And there's Kyla Scannon, who's like university plus masters maybe, and really, really smart, but very good at creating memeable terms. Like her term, I think about 3 years ago, at the kind of back end of Biden, was vibe session.
Yeah.
Do you remember that one?
I think so, yeah. I think I've seen that one, yeah.
I think and what she was trying to say is that people experience the economy via vibes. Like, how are you feeling, man? Not pure economics of what's your net kind of disposable income or what's how you feeling. And that how you feeling kind of dictated how you respond in the election. And it was such a good meme that people used it. And even from the Fed, people were trying to interview her because she was almost representing the people and how they felt, which the politician couldn't really understand because the numbers look okay. The GDP looks good and this looks good and the unemployment looks good, but they couldn't understand why people were basically livid, as it were. It's because obviously there are some other economic models that haven't been created yet, that people are actually feeling the pressure. It could be like monopoly practices, it could be concentration, all sorts of microeconomic stuff that macroeconomics don't really take into account. And I think that skill set, you know, okay, there's loads of economists out there. What makes this lady so good? And I think because she's happy to make economics very technical, but also very memeable. And that's unfortunately what the good engineers are able to do, and they become founders or YC people or people who start podcasts are normally very, very good engineers in that technical space. And the popular ones, obviously, the ones that are quite articulate and able to present stuff in a simple way.
Yeah, because, you know, to go full circle back to even in FDEs, right? Even if you are extremely talented in the technical world, you've got great product understanding, you can triage issues and all that sort of stuff, but you're unable to articulate the solution well enough for the end customer to really understand the tangible impact of it. I'm not saying the end customer won't necessarily benefit or work it out themselves, but in I don't know in a QBR or a weekly Scrum or whatever it might be that you're doing, if you're unable to sort of translate those findings in a palatable way, that means that makes the meeting worth attending. That means that they are able to sort of take that information and go deliver it back to the higher ups or the lower downs or whatever it might be, right? Within that vertically in that business, then you are not doing that job well enough, you know. So the communication piece is massive because fundamentally, mate, you know, we're increasingly in a world now, you know, where coding is getting democratized to an extent, right?
Yeah.
More and more every day. And look, and you're going to have the kind of the purists that will tell you that people are releasing vibe coded bullshit on the internet, which has got security flaws and all that sort of stuff. I get that, and it's true, and it is happening, of course. So that's why I think coders are here to stay for a long time.
Yeah.
But the 0 to 1 gap has been narrowed hugely because of the advances in technology. But what hasn't been narrowed down is the ability to communicate, and that goes two ways. Even with the advancements of these LLMs, mate, if you can't effectively communicate to the AI what it is that you're trying to do, mate, you're burning tokens. That's all that's happening. You know, so in any way, shape, or form, mate, whatever we cut, and I think this would be a central theme that you and I will discover across all these different types of roles that we'll look towards about, is this an emerging piece? Is this an emerging piece, right?
Yeah.
It's the ability to communicate it. Like a radiologist, mate. You know, the findings that you see, whatever it is that you see, good news or bad news, how do you communicate that? Right?
Yeah. Agree.
Any way, shape, or form, mate. What makes a good doctor versus a bad doctor isn't necessarily that they don't know what your kind of health condition is, but it's the ones that have the nice bedside manner,
Yeah.
that's got empathy, that can deliver good news and bad news to you. Mate, we've had two babies, right? And the first doctor that told us about Scarlet versus the one that told us about Caspian, the delivery was completely different.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and the messaging is different, about these different things. And we're that kind of social animal, mate, that needs sometimes an arm, sometimes this, sometimes whatever it might be. And communication is I without a doubt, mate, it's going to be in my mind. I mean, I could be wrong, right? But I think it will be the most sought after skill, man. Effective ones that can do the things that we've been talking about here. Because without it, I think nothing else gets done. So
Yeah,
I mean, that's my little hunch anyway on
well,
it.
no, I think you're right, basically. So as we're kind of thinking, where is their growth? Now, if we take that 10x number from 5,000 to 50,000, that's not even a large amount. Still only 1% of like devs, maybe even less than that in the world. So we're saying, okay, what, in particular in the Western world, what is happening to kind of the really good, really important kind of full stack guy or girl? Well, essentially, you're being arbitraged in two ways. One, well, actually, maybe in three ways. If you're in the States, you're being arbitraged by H1Bs, what people like it or not. It's quite political, but it's not really. Or you're being arbitraged because they're going to actually move it offshore properly.
Yes.
Or you're going to be arbitraged and gaslighted because people say AI can do your job. So there's three ways of arbitraging a US dev. H1B, and that's been done, as we've seen countless times beneath people's noses, or we really move it offshore, or actually we get AI to do it. So all those ways are kind of suppressing the kind of unionization, if there's not such a thing, but the way that you're paid as a dev, even if you're maintain the same quality or even improve it. And then we say, okay, well, where are the people under the stairs moving to? Well, the good ones, you say, with communication, are moving to above the stairs, and it's FDE. And so if we take that gap of like 10x up FDE, and I'm going to say in the Western world, 50% down in terms of devs on the ground, physically sitting in the Western world, who are basically haven't been bought in H1Bs or are basically offshored, then you're talking like a 20x difference. And if you're saying, which you are basically, the only real difference between a exceptional dev and an FDE is kind of like the product manager skills that came up, which is articulate really well, map really well, explain really well, kind of diagram if you want to, jump on a podcast, market yourself, market the product. And that whole product management, which I don't know how big that vein is now, but if we take a standing start-ish of 2000, other than say Apple, I don't know if there's 50,000 PMs, but there's got to be more than, there's probably even 100,000 PMs in the world. And that was a standing start of close to zero. Let's be fair. There were project managers before 2000, maybe 95. Project managers. From 95 to 2025, easily 100,000 PMs. That's from a standing start of zero. I think FDE is kind of the new PM because I can code, I can communicate. Yeah, I can do all that Jira stuff because anybody can do the Jira stuff or whatever. I'm doing much more client-focused stuff. As you said, I'm physically sitting next to the clients. I'm embedded. I'm literally their second cousin. No times removed. I'm physically in the trenches with them, building bases and stuff. So I'm PM plus dev plus McKinsey. That's going to take over the PM role in my mind. Or PM will convert to it if they're technically good enough. That's going to be 50,000 people is my punt easily in 10 years.
Do you see as it's a bit of an not natural's probably the wrong word, but certainly an evolution of these kind of roles, right, where they receive where they just kind of flush towards because of, I think, change of expectations. Don't forget the FDE role that kind of emerged from Palantir exists because Palantir's software was complicated in a way that needed
Yes.
hand holding, right? So whilst the growth is, in terms of what your anticipation is certainly reserved in terms of numerically, the actual real world application exists only on certain types, right? It has to be that enterprise level stuff because
Yes.
the complexity of the software. So it remains to be seen whether a startup, for instance, could implement an FDE. Be interesting to sort of see whether that happens, but I think, let's say for now, probably less likely. So the growth is definitely going to exist in those sort of areas, and I think it's going to be a natural evolution of what these demands are going to look like. So, for instance, when I was coming up in the sales world, the idea of a customer success didn't exist. When we were if I placed any sort of technical individuals or anything like that, customer success doesn't exist. But what is that role really? It's a sales account management role, customer focused orientation, but with a good, I wouldn't say more than superficial understanding of whatever the product is.
Yeah.
They need to have a good overlap on that sort of side. Still 80-20 functional versus technical. Probably actually that's too generous towards the technical aspect, but you can sort of see that evolution. And I think even those roles will naturally evolve more to that side. They'll lend themselves into that kind of pre-sales world where they'll be very technical and showing those sort of areas and mapping into the implementation side. But once you're managing that role, if you don't know how a system is configured to your specific client and able to sort of answer why a way is done in a certain way to create value, or what we could do as an enhancement to create more value, then I think you're going to lose market share. Those roles are going to evolve also that sit akin to these kind of FDE positions, mate. But again, it's got to be still the capability to understand these issues and the willingness and the capability to explain them. Again, it's going to be the sort of side. I think it's just a natural evolution to these roles. But to your point, do you think PMs, they won't go away, but do you think there'll be a natural reduction of these roles that exist in these fields because of these evolving jobs?
Yeah, it's controversial. I think they will, because essentially, think about, and someone will obviously get flamed online for this. What are the PM? a PM is someone who's technically good, let's be fair, and was able to develop a product. Really, if we're really, really, really honest, much more from the company perspective that was building the product to be projected out. So imagine if I was a PM at Salesforce.
Right.
So in reality, Salesforce should have, if they were going to do it the EA model, they would have a PM in every single company they have a contract with.
Yes.
This girl, this guy sit around doing observation like a board observer. They're just going to observe what shit's going down in your organization with art. And then they're going to feed stuff back to you, and they're going to feed stuff back to us. And we're going to have, as you say, the virtual circle of product improvement. And we've got, I don't know, I'm going to make a number up. We've got 100,000 entities that we're in. We've got 100,000 people, one each entity, some for bigger entities. So we've got upwards of 100,000, and we're just getting a big feedback loop. We're literally like manual Google, where everybody's feeding back information from companies, not secret stuff, but just in terms of product usability. They don't have. So essentially, the PM role will change, and they're good enough to do it. But as I say, the FDE, as you said, is literally in the territory, putting up a fort, manning the bases, inviting locals in, building politics, building allies and coalitions in that firm. Very different from basically the colonial office in Whitehall, basically saying, we should do this. We should introduce new taxes or whatever, not to go too far down the kind of the 18th century rabbit hole. But it's like, how do you manage that product? Well, you're saying actually, well, the FDE is we've got people literally sitting in your bay, and the other model is we're going to throw out features to you and see how you respond. When there's rebellion, of course, we're going to change your product. But when there's no rebellion and it's just like a little annoyance, we're going to keep on releasing features. And the old PMs, and I think they're changing already, were the ones that would develop a feature which, on average is going to work. On average, it's good. But that feedback loop wasn't brilliant, as you said. You'd feel it in customer service because the customer service would be getting it here. You feel it in the kind of AEs and the sales would be saying, wait a minute, the customer's not so happy. That wasn't a kind of Google feedback loop. And I think the PMs are going to have to basically say, how do we get closer to the individual clients? And unfortunately, if you've got 10,000, you can't unless you're physically there.
Yeah, that's true. And what as you were talking, I was thinking about PMs, and the importance of their roles. They create that overarching plan, and they've got the kind of holistic visual, right, of what's needs to be done end to end, top to bottom, who's involved, and then they can assign it like a good coach, like a good manager, to manage that project. You're involved in this attack line, etc. With these FDEs, because they're also responsible for the design and deployment.
Yeah.
They're effectively a one person army. Like Rambo.
Yeah, the Rambo.
The Rambo of it. They can come in. They can come in here. Obviously, that's why their salaries are so hugely inflated, because it absorbs 2 or 3 kind of capacities and roles, where they're able to sort of not only sit with you, Gary, to dissect what the issue is, actually link it back to how the product offering can solve that challenge that you've got, explain that value to you so you can go quickly, yep, let's get on with it, and then actually action it. They are doing the whole loop themselves. The only thing they reach back externally is if obviously they're limited by capability or hours, and also they're feeding back any findings, which you hope sit outside of any privacy, but any findings, right, that will help with the kind of base level. I think these FDEs are the kind of super task force in a different way. They're the Schwarzenegger team in Predator, aren't they? That land in the jungle, that deal with all the local militia and this, that, and the other, right? Going back to your kind of troops on the ground analogy. And I think that's a fundamental shift, and whereas I was kind of looking at it before as a bit of an evolution, I guess it's more than that. It's evolution in the sense that it's kind of like these are now the new skills to survive.
Yes.
And the requirements of that. And it's interesting because the growth that you're saying there, I keep thinking about the number you were saying, X to Y, that kind of 5 to 10X change is so reserved. Why is that? Is that because of the appetite in the market, the willingness, do you think, of end clients, or is it going to be an inability to take skills and talent to get them ship shaped into those kind of roles? And I'm just thinking about the limiting factors of this sort of stuff, because it's exciting in different ways. And if I ran a big tech company, that's the kind of things I'll be thinking about, where I'll go, actually, I've got customers. These are the troubles that we're having here. How do we get this team of individuals that are 2-3 people?
Yeah.
For instance, can I train a product manager well enough to do all this sort of stuff? Or does it have to be devs? I don't know, that kind of thing.
I suppose, you raise a good point. And we think back to the kind of mobile, first Google, but really let's take the mobile era from kind of 2009 in terms of advertising. And if you think about a middle class with upside entrepreneurial activity, it would be, man, let's you and I start a digital agency. So whereas you could say recruiting, I'm going to make it up here, recruiting devs in 2005, I'd say, you know what, man, let's start a recruitment for devs in 2005. We know there's going to be a shit ton of them. Banks are expanding. There's like object-oriented, really get bedding in. There's new databases being built. Let's be an agency. We're going to earn 20% premium off each client, and we're going to basically churn people out of university, and we're going to turn them into a bank. That would have been
good. It was a good time, Gary. I can remember.
That would have been a perfect middle class to upper class, as in like I want to raise up and maybe sell for 10 million entrepreneurial activity. In 2012, that entrepreneurial activity would have been, let's start a digital agency. Let's do social. And again, Steve Bartlett's a good example. There's many others. You don't need that many clients at 20% kind of premium. And all we're going to do, we're going to go down the rabbit hole of basically deploying money on Facebook, and it is a rabbit hole. That even today, Facebook platform will make the average person cry because it's really complex. It's constantly moving. It's incredibly dynamic. It's burning out certain areas because people have overutilized it. They're changing the algo all the time. They're rate limiting. They're moving money. There's scams. It's Wild West. And so
Yeah.
anybody that can sit in front of I don't know, Estee Lauder or Revlon or Coca-Cola and say, you know what, I'm really good at deploying Facebook I'm going to make it up, in basic Sri Lanka. You might get
Yes.
you're in with a short list for the contract. Being like, well, I need to be in Sri Lanka, blah, blah, blah. Okay, our contract's 20 million. That's 4 million there and then. And so I think this will be very similar, the FDE, which would be those agencies generally entrepreneurial, like Daniel Priestley, as you mentioned. They would have the technical nous. They're able to focus the people they take on, whether they be from graduate all the way up to an insanely detailed rabbit hole. We are looking at Facebook deployment on social in Sri Lanka. So much so that they're in a short list of 10 globally or whatever, if that's the way of doing it. They could talk for hours on this subject and bore the life out of people. I think FDEs will be the same thing. There'll be FDEs that say, you know what, I'm really good at multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, Big Ten bank, multi-database deployment. If you've got Snowflake, Databricks, Oracle, Postgres, Mongo, Apache, all sorts, if you've got like 10 databases, which most banks unfortunately do, then actually I'm really good at that. And my agency's really good at that. And we're going to put someone in for 6 months at £500,000 or whatever. We are really good. Multi-cloud, hybrid, multi kind of database. We can build an ontology for you and then train your staff. That's it. And I think that sort of specificity where it goes. So I think the opportunity on top of being employed as a forward engineer, 250, 500K, is who is going to be the Daniel Priestley that's going to start an agency with such insane detail specificity that it makes your eye water, basically. So that is an opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. And the compelling nature of it all is as the kind of establishment comes with it, and there's maturity in the delivery and the model of it, they'll start to break down where you can automate. Agentic solutions get introduced, and then scalability becomes really sort of hyper in a different way, right? Yeah, man, I totally agree, and it's interesting because we there's a lot of doom in the market for obvious reasons, and hey, look, I'm forever talking every week, man. I'm talking to someone who's lost their job. It's fucking insane, and it's not always because of the AI element, right? As you talked about, it's the kind of the visa pieces. A lot of offshoring is happening. Companies just aren't making money. But notwithstanding, there is opportunity that exists in a different way that are sort of emerging as we find new economies almost that kind of service the old ones, because for big companies in particular, don't forget the kind of client type that these FDE roles will exist for are ones that have deep pockets, because they are invested in these kind of technologies in the first place. So if you are going to move towards these sort of areas, there is a bit more of a roadmap. There's a bit more of, not roadmap, bit more rope for you to sort of pull on, I think, in terms of that opportunity. Notwithstanding, because of the growth that you kind of predicting, I think that is very reserved and quite modest. I think competition will heat up because more and more people will experience and understand that these sort of things exist. How the cream rises to the top, though, will be interesting because, like I said right at the beginning, I'm as we were talking, mate, I keep visualizing this massive Venn diagram, and it's not just 3 shapes; it's kind of 4 or 5 shapes of these different skills, and that person has to overlap almost all of them in order to do this role. So, to build an effective agency out of this, right? I mean, if you can assemble 4, 5, maybe 10 individuals of this sort of stuff, then that really will be the Schwarzenegger team.
Yeah. But you're right. But that kind of like coinage, you can still print a kind of digital agency money, and you'll be reinforcing your kind of learning. Because if you think about, say, like you take a big I was talking to my cousin the other day, who works at a bank. They don't have time to basically have people going off on these side quests, basically doing stuff.
Yeah.
And the doing stuff will be, well, okay, I know a bit about AI, but my ML skills aren't very good, and we don't really use Apache Spark, and we don't do this, and we don't do that, and I haven't done evals. It's a million rabbit holes that they don't necessarily want people running off and doing in their organisation. And so they are more than overfilled with capable people in banks or in consultancies or whatever, but they don't have the kind of, what's the word? They don't have the appetite for the side quests that are necessary, basically, to be able to get the skills that they actually want to bring back. And so the opportunity initially for in-house, which is okay, just like in 95, let's get some in-house kind of techie guys and girls, and then, oh shit, we actually need 10 times as many, then we have to outsource to agencies and use consultants. I think that sort of roll down is very similar to what's going to happen, in that initially every company wants to employ them. So those 2,500 roles that are on application, yeah, that's fine, go and get them. But if the pool's 2,000, then you're already in supply demand issue. So then they say, well, okay, well, actually, wait a minute, man's opened an agency and we want full-time employed, but maybe if we employ the agency, get some traction, and then maybe try and poach one of man's staff like they used to do with audit staff and so on. Yeah, we can do that. And so then the agencies get bigger and bigger and become these like FDM factories for churning them out. Because, as you say, you can go to a top-class university and you can get someone with really good AI, ML, evals, no front-end, Python skills. You can get that. And then if they have to go through 6 months intense hazing to teach them all the communication stuff, or they pick people already who are good at communicating but not doing it full-time at university, it ain't going to take more than kind of 3 to 6 month FDM style approach or McKinsey style approach to get people who already know the ML stuff and are keeping up to date, but have been taught in kind of Brené Brown or TED Talks language how to simplify stuff. I think there's going to be definitely an FD factory in those type of consultancies within the next 2-3 years if they haven't already started, which I'm sure they have.
Yeah, you're probably right, and because we can't be the only people that sort of see this opportunity clearly, right? And notwithstanding the ones that sort of work in this field already or the ones that are kind of deploying it, but the customer themselves must see it, and so are actually, and then in turn, them as an industry working out, well, what's the equivalent of our FDE that we can utilize it on that sort of stuff, because that's how you see these things grow. In its own right and capabilities, because they can see actually, whilst we can't map exactly what it's going to be like, the fact that they've been able to innovate, like if you really break down the composition of the roles, Gary, they already exist in their own right,
they do
as silos.
Yes.
So when you've got your own kind of business and go, well, what exists in our world but in silos that we can merge together and create an offering in a service in the way that these guys have done. And it won't work in every industry, clearly, but it could do. And where it does, therefore you kind of sort of see growth in this areas. And that's why I see so many entrepreneurs in residence roles sort of stick up, right? Because you're right, mate, I mean, it's so interesting, right? If you think about a bank rather, sorry, and whether you want to or whether you're against it or for it, but you can't deny the opportunity, the potential, if you do map an ontology to something, and what can sort of be unearthed on that sort of side, and then from that kind of material, what opportunities you can sort of create, what advantages you can create in the market space with that sort of information. It remains to be seen. And I think those ones that you need bravery in this market at the moment.
Yeah, you do.
You need bravery as a candidate to do actually how to self-market themselves. As you talked about, write information, create blogs, create videos, all that sort of stuff. Everybody's understanding the power of personal brand. You need bravery as a business to try these kind of new ventures here. Like you said, Palantir was struggling to convey their kind of technical depth onto client sites. Okay, what do? We innovate, we be brave, we create a role like this sort of area here. you've got whether you like them or not, agree with them or not, you've got to put hats off when it comes to innovation in that sort of way. And I think that next depth level of whatever this kind of growth in terms of roles or the companies that will do well and survive, because everybody's under attack, mate. Claude created Claude Design, right? Google's already got Stitch and all that sort of stuff that comes out of it. But when Anthropic rather release something, everybody sort of sits up and takes note. It could be just clever marketing, mate. But the amount of newsletters I've had yesterday. This is the end of Figma. This changes everything. All that sort of stuff. Hype. But they will score at some point. And then when that changes, mate, there's a lot of big businesses. I mean, Figma's a public business. There's a lot of businesses out there that ain't going to survive this new realm. And with that, it's people need to change and look towards what else that can be done here. And maybe it is, mate, a combination of 2-3 different types of skill sets that create themselves a more rounded version of what those roles were going to be. Actually, don't hire these 3 areas. I could do one of them. I could do all of them. And you can deploy me in these different ways based on what we've seen here. It takes that level of innovation and ability to, and this is why I come back to it, mate, where I think entrepreneurs were going to, no one really, you've got to be a special type of person. It's kind of short-circuited, mate, to be honest, to want to do your own thing. I mean, I'm trying to do it at the moment, mate. And I bought this, Trim bought me this book only 3 weeks ago, mate. I'm like, I don't know, 60, 70 pages. No, it's my own notebook. But I've written 60, 70 pages of notes, man, of shit I've got to do every day.
Yeah.
You gotta, and I think these kind of roles create that in you, where people decide, actually, I can now go do these different things. And in the world that we've just talked about, it's the agency model, perhaps. Who knows, right? But it wouldn't surprise me if we see those sort of things. In fact, did you see whether there was any agencies that already exist for the FDEs?
I looked. I think I saw a couple, and I went down. I found someone writing was very good, and he was a kind of conversion guy. So he wrote this piece and basically talking about the full length of FDEs, and then basically saying he offers a course in converting people to FDEs and teaching how people to interview, almost like those people who teach you how to interview for BCG and McKinsey. And there's good money in that, because obviously good money in the roles. So it was that level. But I think what you've raised is a good point, and I kind of think things culturally now, and think of, I've got this ass-kicking hierarchy, kind of Maslow's hierarchy of ass-kicking. And so man's the chair of a board. He is getting his ass kicked by the shareholders, Bill Ackman, this kind of activist investor saying, what you going to do with AI? Good. Then the chair is kicking the ass of the CEO. Say it's your missus or whatever. Then the CEO is kicking the ass of all the C-suite, saying, what are we doing? Where's our story? What's going on? As you see with Apple, particularly for whatever. And then the C-suite kicking the ass of like the kind of VPs, sexy VPs, presidents, whatever you call them. And then the president kicking. So that's the kind of Maslow's hierarchy of ass kicking. So what's the way to kind of sidestep that? You say, well, I need just 6 months of my next bonus, or 9 months. Let's agitate. I mean, in these companies, I think, let's check JP Morgan. I think they spend, the last time I looked, 15 billion on technology. 15 billion. And this is not a tech company, it's a staid bank, pretty good bank, number one, but 15 billion on technology. So you're telling me you can't carve out $500,000 for an FDE? I think you probably can. So I'm a C-suite exec in tech. I basically say, yeah, let's get 2 FDEs from Palantir or whatever. Let's pay them £500,000. If they find nothing, who cares? That's like 0.01% of our budget, less than that. And if they find something, great. I look good, then the CEO looks good, then the chair looks good, and the chair can tell the market. So to get someone in from Palantir or McKinsey or whatever for FDE, it isn't going to cost them much. It's actually positive political capital. So I think that's there's still mid-stage of let's get them in, see what they can do, let them move about, and then maybe you can get away with that till 2027, where people say, okay, enough of the guys or girls rooting around, what have you found? Let's got another year and a half to run. And then anything that gets found, then they either pile in with full-time recruits, which they won't be able to afford because they're always going to get paid more, a Palantir or OpenAI or an Anthropic. So then you pile in with agencies who can do it slightly cheaper, maybe the 400K versus the 500K. And so that's got another 4 or 5 years to run. And you keep on turning that handle. I don't see any firm trying to basically go off on side quest and let's say create this in-house training of these multiple skill sets, which we already have. I don't see any firm doing that for maybe 10 years. I see mostly firm, maybe take on 1 or 2 of them, but also mostly outsourced in a very similar way to Murex and SAP and all the other big systems we've had introduced. That I've never seen that many specialist in-house compared to when we need the kind of outsourced resource when we need to make a big change.
Yeah, and I think that's a good read of the market, right? Because there's so much ambiguity with regards to the longevity of certain products within the AI space or whatever it might be. So to invest in a permanent kind of scope would be not short-sighted, but perhaps over egging it.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas taking a trusted. This is the same. I did contract recruitment, and I specifically look at third-party applications in the trading software pieces because you could not find permies operating in these trading software because they already belong to the consultancy and they were getting paid well enough, or they've gone right. Actually, I'm going to be brave enough. The market conditions. I can sit outside R35. I'm going to charge a ton of money to configure your open link system, right? And banks were like JP Morgan was a great example of this. They were happy to pay over the odds for this sort of stuff because they didn't want to. If they could hire permies, they would, but they couldn't. That's the fact, right? So on the ontology nature of this sort of stuff, be it a Palantir or whatever it might be, OpenAI, Anthropic. I mean, look at the jobs look at the salaries Anthropic are paying. I mean, for just like I don't know, customer service. Customer success, man. Let alone if they're going to be hiring for these FDR roles, right? FDE roles are of it. So it's your read is spot on, mate.
Well, hopefully, and I think I was trying to explain to someone the other day, and I did it maybe a garbled job of it. They're saying that for my whole time, well, not the whole time, but since the dawn of the digital transformation era, which kind of like 90s, where every firm is going through some digital transformation, and there's still some roles out there, actually some good roles still, but less of them. And the premise of digital transformation was, man, you know what? I'm going to have everything talking to each other in a kind of Rosetta Stone way. All the data is going to be brought together and it's going to speak to each other and it's going to have data libraries and data definitions and all this other stuff. Now, for political reasons and technical reasons, it was not possible because the databases are constantly moving forward and obviously each person is saving all sorts of random names. So JP Morgan was a good example. When we looked at a database for JP Morgan London, you'd have about 15 different versions, LDN, LONDN, LOND, and N without O. You'd have all sorts of crazy shit. And so later on with fuzzy logic, you could match someone and say, well, London without the O is probably the same as London with the O, but again, not to perfect it. So I think that this whole digital transformation was rooted in golden source. There was a concept and someone said, we need to get to a golden source. And it sounds really good in a boardroom. We're going to get to a golden source and we're going to spend 50 million quid and blah, 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 blah. I think AI, LLMs and Palantir have killed the golden goose, which is the golden source. So if we think about the makeup of the LLM, 18%-ish, 15 to 20% is Reddit. Now, Reddit is, I know you like Reddit, it's a good platform, conspiratorial, but what it does show is basically it says it's got niches, and the riches are in niches, to use, I can't remember the guy's name now, one of the really good creators, riches are in niches, and it's able to pass the kind of the flat earth and dispel some of the flat earth stuff and some of the no one landed on the moon stuff and get it into a homogeneous to predict results for us. So it's able to take insane information, some of it really insane conspiratorial stuff, which is just made up, and actually say, I'm not going to use that, I'm not going to use that, and come up to this, oh yeah, I'm going to basically write a really good CV for man. Where did the flat earth stuff go? Where did the no man landed on the moon stuff go? And it's all faked. So you think, okay, wait a minute. So you're telling me I can take a mad database of information, parse out all the rubbish, the nonsense, and the cult stuff, and get me a good answer? Really, like a 92% answer for man? Yeah. So if LLMs can do that, I don't need a golden source anymore, because I haven't got a golden source for the LLMs, because Reddit's crazy, Facebook is crazy, Meta's crazy, all the information it's used, it's crazy in the margin, at the margin. And so they've basically said, I don't need a golden source anymore. I just need a very, very good, well-trained, fuzzy logic-ish, it's sexier than that, on top of all your random databases. And I'm going to basically create this ontology-ish on top of it already, which maps into connective things and comes up with some sort of semantic layer. If I can employ a real ontology on top of that, the thingy and then employ an AI on top of that, it's even better. But even without the Palantir, the system already, LLMs are really, really good at creating a kind of semantic ontology already. It's, it could be 88% or whatever, but always better than you would have got with a 50 million program for golden source.
So you know, on that point, just to kind of, you know, there's an idea of being a prospector, right, and kind of sifting out all the dirt and then leaving with the gold of where the data is. You know, that's the point. But then also having that product mind to understand, okay, the people that use this, how do they use it?
Yes.
Right. So for instance, you know, what's interesting is I've spoken to so many people who sit in the HR space who are at risk or have lost their jobs to either offshoring or AI, because the company has built a bot that can handle a lot of the, you know, 20 to 40% of a HR administrator's job in certain things like answering queries. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the main, the traditional corporate behavior or cultural behavior of X company is that they can have access to information or refer to contracts or ask someone next to them. But what they do is they pick up the phone and they phone someone they know in the department and they go, hey, how many holidays have I got? Or what's my sick day policy? Or I'm thinking about having a family. What's the whatever it is, right?
Yeah. I think I've done
and now they've got access to all this information at their fingertips on this sort of stuff. What's interesting is, I mean, this is a very simple base issue, and anybody that sort of listens to this will go, well, surely instead of picking up the phone now, they just ask the chatbot. Right. But I'm interested to see whether that is actually the behavior of how they will do things, or will they, even with access to all this information, right? And maybe it's a bit of a tangent to your golden source point, whether people actually use it this way. And this is the beauty of this role, where the complexities maybe I've not been able to explain it very well, because I just go, group these jobs together and you make this kind of Frankenstein job. But this is what I'm talking about. Even when you solve this issue with the data, and that's a big ask, do you have the way the users are going to engage with it? You know, and I'm interested to see, going back to the example I was just saying, are queries going to be reduced, right? Do people still ask the same amount of volume of questions now that you've got a bot versus this? Or do you get more questions and therefore you've proven the value or not proven the value, or whether you've actually removed, or is the actual fundamental thing where you're asking about something so personal actually better dealt with a human? I don't know. And it's going to be interesting when you talk about these FDE roles. It's a different kind of user case. I get it. But even if you solve the kind of this myriad, have you solved this one? You know, it's an interesting dichotomy.
I suppose it makes me think of the best kind of terminology I've had for like FDEs is, or the way to explain it is, for the last 20 years, we've all bought software that you kind of use as a standard operating procedure, and you mold to the software. So I like SAP, but every single organization I went to used SAP badly, and because they saw SAP as kind of like a Ford Cortina or Mondeo back in the day, or today it would be like Tesla's probably too sexy, but say like an Audi or A6 or something, as opposed to seeing it like a Formula One car. And the Formula One car, you mould to the driver. We mould ourselves to the Audi A6. You can move the seat, man, you can warm up the seat, you can do whatever, but essentially it's an A6. That's it. That is the size of the car. Where the Formula One car within the rules or whatever are moulded to the driver. Oh, do you want understeer? Oh, yeah, I'm understeer. Oh, no, actually, your partner's an oversteer guy. So those two same cars in that same plan are different cars, completely different cars. They look the same, obviously. Same wind resistance and all that, drag and stuff, whatever. Explained it badly, but they are different cars. You want oversteer, you can get oversteer. I like understeer. They're different cars. The A6 is A6. So we molded ourselves to PeopleSoft in the day, then to obviously Greenhouse. We molded, obviously payroll is a bit different, ADP, but we mold ourselves to kind of, Gusto. All of people in HR are molded to the system. That's it. That is the way you're going to operate because that's how the market operates. And yeah, you can disable some features and you can add some features in and pay more money, but that is the ethics. Whereas what the FDE is doing, saying, "Oh no, man's CHRO and he needs a Formula One car. Yeah, it's come from the same stable, but he wants a bit of oversteer, and he wants this and he wants that, all within the rules. You can have it, mate. And then we're going to drive it around Nürburgring or whatever." Brands Hatch, we're going to drive it around Silverstone and we're going to see how it fits, and then we're going to adjust it a bit. Then we're going to drive it around again. And we'll sit. And then we're going to drive it around in the winter. We're going to drive it around in wets, and we're going to drive. I could go on forever. To stop me any time. Then we're going to drive it around in the sunshine, and we're going to put on different tires, whatever. But we are moulding that car to man who's a different CHRO than the person sitting in essentially the same vehicle-ish by the same company, but they are two very different cars. Man cannot get out of his car and get into the other car because it's got oversteer versus understeer and molded to him. And he's a different height and he's a different weight and his hair's longer. It's a completely different car. And I think the FDE is really kind of, I don't know what they call him now. What was Christian Horner? That kind of either the chief engineer or the principal. I don't remember what his name was, the guy, the Red Bull guy. Jerry Halliwell's husband. Is it Christian Horner or Horner, whatever his name is? Then that person saying, I'm going to mould this Red Bull car exactly to you, CHRO. Are you ready? Do you know what you want? Are you willing to drive it? Are you driving it fast enough, or are you going to drive it like Miss Daisy, like I'm driving my Tesla at 20 miles an hour in North London, which has got speed limits galore?
So the limitations of that obviously is defined by the parameters that the software, right, like SAP, is able to do. I'm not familiar well enough with it to sort of comment, right? But you're right. I think in the general sense of it, in the sense of, we buy off the shelf products and we mold to it, because that's how it works, and we work within its confines. And then, the ability to customize anything is basically usually administrative views and allowances and preferences, right? Dark mode, I remember when dark mode came out for everybody, it was like, it's a game changer, and everybody started calling people psychos because if you use anything in light mode.
Yeah.
But I think with the emergence of AI, what this creates is, and this is obviously what's scaring the market so much, is the ability to create individual, bespoke, personalized software, not just for the company, but also for the viewer level.
Yeah.
And that presents itself another opportunity for an FDE or an akin to an FDE position, right? Where they're able to they've got that expertise. For instance, if you have worked with a business and helped design with them custom solutions, custom software for marketing, be it payroll, finance, whatever it is, right? Create all these different, that works, that can show value, reduce costs, effective to run, and is completely traceable. You can then take that skill set because you're able to communicate, you're able to plan it, technology, you can deploy it and move it to another business and do the same thing and replicate and offer the kind of thing that you're talking about, right? That custom level of seat position, driving experience, weight, etc., to an audience level, from C level through to everything. Because the world is going to be in that position where a piece of software that does the same thing will have so many different viewpoints for you
Yeah.
as a user versus me as a user, right? And that is the only limitation is the ability for someone to sort of A, imagine it, and B, deploy it.
Yeah.
And these FDE positions will work in that sort of way. And perhaps that's the agency model that it sits in, because buying software is expensive, mate. Is fucking
Yeah.
expensive. Going back to, I think we talked about this before. Workday CTO leaving Workday to join Anthropic as
Yeah.
a technical person in their team is looked at. Oh my god, look at this guy! He didn't go as a CTO, John. But what it tells me instead is something much deeper, man. Which is this dude knows so many ins and outs of that kind of particular software. Knows the
Yeah.
frustrations, the user behaviors, all this sort of stuff. The advantage of being able to advise a frontier model
Yeah.
business in terms of these things is huge, because I think that's going to be the value layer it creates. It's going to remedy all the frustrations, all the issues that a user will use, and it will render a huge incumbent like Workday. This is my read on it, right? I could be completely wrong. To much more on the background. They're going to
Yeah.
be still the database, all the sort of really important backup stuff. But the value that you and I see as a user will no longer be those people. And I think more of that happening and will lead to potentially this spread of FDEs in these capacities, mate. Because I think you don't need to buy off the shelf software anymore. If you're brave enough and you're able to commit the time to it, why do you need to buy a really expensive, rigid, bureaucratic piece of software like Workday? Other than the fact that your shareholders are going, why are you spending money creating our own when we could just buy this? There's no risk in using those things until
Yeah.
there is, right?
True.
Because these people need to go do these things,
So yeah, there's something happened this week, very similar to what you said there, which is Salesforce announced, I think they call it headless 360. Salesforce headless.
Okay.
And
Not
it's
heard of
very
that. Okay,
similar
what is
to
this?
headless, what they called headless was it CMS?
Uh-huh.
Headless CMS kind of era. And essentially, the content management era, I think it's about 10 years old, maybe 15, was saying, yeah, okay, man's going to basically have this website with this content management. It's really a content management system, I suppose, where you're putting yourself out there. And we're going to give him a GUI. He's got this front end, etc. And then this headless movement was, well, actually, we're going to give him all the workflow, but he hasn't necessarily all the back end infrastructure of the website deployment stuff. But we're not going to basically enforce him through our GUI in that way.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So basically, to be fair to Salesforce, which is other than Microsoft, in my mind, maybe Microsoft and Adobe, other than those two, are the biggest SaaS company. I think it's bigger than Adobe in terms of revenue, in SaaS revenue. The guy is a legend. So he will go from Siebel, actually the Oracle, which competing with Siebel.
Oracle. Benioff, you're talking about, yeah?
Yeah,
Not Benioff.
from Oracle
Yeah.
competing with Siebel, completely wiping
Yeah.
the floor with Siebel to move to software as a service, then saying, you know what, 2 years ago, we need to go Agent Force. That didn't really work out. Then now saying, you know what, shit, we need to go headless. And what he's basically saying, you don't want to log into Salesforce. You want all the workflow and the control, which we talked about earlier, the workflow and the control it offers, because it's really an SOP, which you've tailored to your firm. So you want to control that. You want the salesperson not to be able to bugger off and your clients, and you want to be able to predict his or her revenue. That's kind of what your core facilities are. He can't walk off with the black book, or she can't walk off with the black book, and you can predict at any point in time how much money they're going to make, so you can tell shareholders on Wall Street. Those are the kind of, if I'm simplistically putting it, but those are two key functions of the Salesforce or any CRM. So yeah, you don't need to log into a blue screen for that. You can, or dark mode, as you say. You just do it back end. We're going to still force people to put shit into it, don't get me wrong. And we're going to force that control, and the CFO still gets to look at predictions and pipelines and blah, 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 blah. But no, you don't need to log into it. You can just go headless, mate. You can put whatever front end, get your FD to put a front end on it, get your FP&A guy, get the other guy to put a front end on it. And that is interesting.
It becomes powered by Workday, powered by Salesforce, as opposed to using the actual tool. And you can see it happening because so many. I think what this has done is, if you're involved in this area, you're tracking it, and you are seeing the pain points day to day, and you're seeing the ability and the opportunity to create your own version of it.
Yeah.
But you have maybe a fatigue, you have a reservation about, actually, can I make sure that the back end is robust enough, it's secure, it does all the things that it's going to do, it's supposed to do, like it's doing right now, without
Yeah.
compromising. This is a brilliant halfway point. It's a lovely gateway drug almost, right? To go, this is what I can create. I can bolt this on here. It's completely to your liking, Gary. And if you're my key stakeholder, right? I've never liked that particular fucking blue. All right, what's your favorite color? I like this particular hex code teal. Great.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like. I mean, I'm being facetious, but you get my
No,
point.
you're right.
And I think it's a tremendous opportunity. And then loop full circle, loop back round. It involves the ability to get a skill set in that can understand it, manage the product, design and deploy, and communicate it to you. You know, and get it's back to these kind of FDE positions, right? I keep wanting to call it forward, mate, because that was the ticker that you and I were discussing over the WhatsApp on Sunday.
Our titles will be basically the tickers. Because in that sense, if I take back to your workday CHRO, if I'm the CHRO, I'm thinking, whether I like it or not, and I'm saying in the Western world, jobs are moving somewhere else, but like it or not. So my head count, the people I generally manage as a CHRO, is moving from 10,000 down to 9,500, or if you're a block, it's moving down to 6,000 or something. So it's moving. So maybe not immediately, but slowly my pay, because I'm managing 10,000 CHRO to 6,000, generally it's going to get a negative vibe to it. It's going to be like, wait a minute, we're not paying you more because you're managing less people, there's less activity. So as you say, some of the kind of underemployment in those roles in the kind of HR is going to be because we're rolling down and people just expect to roll down the resources. So that's one pressure. Then you'd say, well, actually, there's a completely different track of a unit of work coming in. Oh, shit, people are now valuing humans in tokens, etc. Shit. Okay. So we still need the work done. Why can't I just be this kind of person that's managing all the unit of work? When you want to outsource it to the global centers, or you want to basically have someone sitting there, or you have consultants, or you have agents. Why can't I be that? Why can't I be the person that manages all the unit of work? And we're talking about football quite a lot on our chat line with boys, and we're looking at what's going on with Chelsea. And you say, well, this kind of director of sport stroke, in America they call it director of athletics, who sits above the coach, etc., or the GM. That's the role that's basically saying, I'm going to manage all these activities of the unit of the club, above the management, above this, above the youth, etc. And you could argue that HR, if they were going to do a land grab, could say, I think the unit of work is going to be, I don't know, hybrid. It's going to be outsource it to bodies, outsource it to agents, it's going to be insourced with people, it's going to be like near shore, far shore, Jersey shore, whatever shore. It's going to be I just want to manage it. I want to be the person that basically is managing the unit of work input, whether it be humanistic or kind of anthropomorphic humans or AI or offshore, onshore. And I want to be that person that has this whole huge team underneath me that basically is managing a unit of work like we're managing a unit of basically iron turned into steel. And if I can do that, I need to go to Anthropic to learn what are the units of work and can do human conversion. I want to be the person that creates the new term for brake horsepower, which is still used, unfortunately, even though we have no horses in Ferraris. I want to be that person 100 years later, they're still using my terminology and I'm managing the brake horsepower and I'm converting it horses to humans to cars. And I want to be that person that manages that unit of value that the board say, how much brake horsepower have we got? How much compute or intelligent compute have we got? That we can make up an acronym. And I want to be that person managing it, not in seats, but could be tokens, it could be hours, it could be whatever. But I'm going to be the head of the unit of intelligence into this firm.
this is the difficulty of it all, isn't it? And I think this is why this space is so deeply debated at the moment, because on one hand, how do like the measurement of productivity, right, of people in work, it renders us, when we come to talk about data annotation, for instance, right, this is where it kind of leads itself massively, because they're paying for output. And it reduces you down into, as a human, it reduces every element away, as a human, and it analyzes you as a unit of output.
Yeah.
And obviously, for obvious reasons, that's a problem, because just from a societal, moral viewpoint of you and I as an individual within the business, it creates a real conundrum, because, clearly we're more than just a unit of output. There's intangibles about us that we contribute to a business, that friendship, relationships, culture, in a different way that cannot be measured.
Yes.
So, when the CHR role absorbs the unit of control, or token utilization, or productivity output, but no longer measures all these other things, it's hard, because, and it all comes down to incentives, right? Is the business incentivized to be the number one in its sector? But what does number one really mean? Is number one the most money made? Is it the most productive, whatever that means? Or, as a rounded business, it's got the best, places to work for? I don't know, mate. And we're starting to be able to make decisions on a direction of travel of a business, because the technology is enabling us in so much more than we've ever done before, mate. To the point where I think we can go so far this way that some businesses will become completely unrecognizable for people to work in, and some businesses will stay on course, believe in the values of compassion, for instance, let's say, and value those things overall. And we're going to see splits, aren't we? Do you think? Because the pressure is going to be there for that.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I definitely agree. And but maybe one disagreement, I would say that maybe in the last few years, the kind of, I call them the PowerPoint era and the spreadsheet era, we have defined intelligence, and then social media made it even worse, by a unit of output. And so imagine you and I sitting in a room and we're both kind of pseudo intelligent or whatever, and we both know stuff. But as you said earlier, you pinpoint it perfectly. You're able to articulate our intelligence, or that intelligence, intelligence, maybe that's a new word, intelligence, art and intelligence. You're able to communicate that intelligence much better than me. You look more intelligent. And this really comes back to the FP&A versus finance issue. And because I'm in finance, I can see, and I could see the growth. And I was never in either. I was in finance generically, but in a kind of valuation, geeky, how much is that derivative worth model. And our communication was every day, because we send a P&L. That was a form of communication to the trader. We have to speak to them, but we'd also send them something every single day. You made X. This is why we believe you made it. Let's have an argument. Yes, we agree. We'd send it up the chain. So that was a hand-to-hand communication, and you could form a relationship, because every day you got to argue with the trader, good or bad. And finance had that, well, actually, we have a less of a cadence of communicating, and therefore there's less, as you say, relationship building. And then FP&A came along and said, actually, back to your point of the FDE, they are really good communicators of complex information. Complex finances communicated into a beautiful diagram on a spreadsheet or in PowerPoint. And that level of communication meant they were able to completely, let's just say, outflank normal finance and say, well, actually, yeah, we both know stuff. You probably know more than me, but my articulation is fantastic, and my pictorial explanation is even better, and charts, and really communicating in such a way that make it really viable. And the founders that we've seen in the engineering, they've been good at communicating on podcasts, on this, on Rogan, on blogs, etc., on Twitter even, which is really, really good and hard to communicate well on. And so I think it comes back to your main point, man, that the technical skills are always going to be valuable at university, but that communication there, I've seen it in finance, you've seen it in HR, because normally the CHROs are the most articulate. They're the better people in HR than CHROs in terms of compassion, empathy, psychology, industrial psychology training. But the CHROs are political weapons. They're really, really good at politics. And they're good at people, but they're good at politics particularly. And so in every single function you know and that you've dealt with, communication has been a number one skill.
Yeah, I completely agree with that last point. I think what the interesting thing about the intelligence side is, I'm not sure we can measure intelligence, right? And because if I think about it, intelligence has always been used, it's been weaponized. You know, I mean, look, we're a minorities in this country, right? And you know, the historical kind of elements to being a minority is that education has been weaponized in use of propaganda to kind of dehumanize people like you and I who aren't white, you know, because of the color and pigmentation of our skin. You know, people who are black or non-white and Chinese, etc., aren't as intelligent, all this sort of stuff. So, I think, and it carries over in today's kind of corporate world conversation when we talk about intelligence. And then, you know, we're now utilizing it in the sense of comparing ourselves to machines and the ability for machines to be intelligent. And I think that's a dangerous road in certain capacities. You know, the fact that we've called it artificial intelligence could straight away creates your way of thinking. It's manipulating the way that we think in the sense of things, right? And that's by design, and we all know it. But when we kind of extrapolate to the discussion point that we're having today, I think you know, there will be businesses, mate, that are going to measure the output of a human being in their workforce and try to equate it to things like intelligence and productivity and stuff. And we all do it, right? That's why PIPs exist and you know, reviews and all that sort of shit exists, right? And I'm not saying there isn't a place for it, but I think you know, I've got, this is another show entirely, but I've got ill wills of people kind of looking at those sort of viewpoints anyway, because capturing a moment in time of how someone performs isn't necessarily going to be the crystal ball as to whether they're going to be effective for you in the long term, right? There's always context to things. So, and I think, like I said, we're going to get to a point where people are going to make a decision where they go through the gate. Are they going to go left or are they going to go right? Are they going to, because of the political nature of these particular positions, because of self-survival, right? And because need to be able to demonstrate to them, because like you said, your prediction, we're managing less people now. What is your job? Why aren't I paying you the same amount of work money? You know, surely, because they're going to grab these strands of things as to show why they're effective in their roles, right? And it could be, hey, I've been able to distill the person down into a number. And the number, if anytime Man or Gary is less than 5 on a day-to-day basis, means they're not effective. I start managing these people out, or I start looking at the heavy hitters who are 6 and 7s, right? Who can come in and do and fulfill these jobs. It could happen, but is that what we want? Right, and that's the kind of view I have on it. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. I know. I don't want that to happen. I want us to be able to look at what people do in work more than whether they're intelligent or productive. You know, they can create. Productivity is also, I don't know, mate. It's also something that's very easy to feel that you've got a grasp on. But I think not, mate. You know, can you remember back in the day, you know, when we first started work, mate, it's a lot of FaceTime.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I agree.
But most of them were just searching fucking BBC homepage, mate, looking at the sports, you know? I'm still here, boss. No, you're not doing anything, no, are you?
I think there's definitely a kind of fight for what is the new primacy of. For the last few years, I've basically been outside of corporate and thinking, okay, who is the kind of, they've got the CEO, who's the second in command? And I suppose it changes each age of the firm. So initially, the firm starts, then it's going to be like head of engineering if it's a brand new firm.
Like CEO, definitely CTO. Yeah.
Then you say, well, okay, maybe it moves to product, and then it moves to sales. And sales and marketing, you can argue that maybe sales more appropriate closing a deal. And so you say, okay, where is the, and then later on it moves, when the sales is a machine, it moves to finance. Finance just churn out the numbers, 6% a year extra, blah, blah, blah. And so I think they're the kind of, I'm going to go off at a real tangent here, by the way. I'm reading the book by, well, I'm listening to a book actually, it's quite lazy, by Peter Turchin, I think it's called The End.
Okay.
This is a guy, I think he's a Russian emigre, post kind of breakup of the Soviet Union, who basically tries to map in the history of the world when chaos actually happened in a country. Very similar to a kind of Ray Dalio, which does it from a macro. And there's another lady, I can't remember her name, Walker something Walker, who kind of maps where civil wars happen. But he does it
Is
from
is it for cycle reasons? Is it for cyclical
well,
kind of observation, or
not so much that, because they say like the Dalio is like cycle, the 75 years, 80 years, and that sort of stuff, fourth turning stuff. He's much more, what are the elements that cause chaos?
okay?
And so there's two elements that he can map back to, like, I don't know, either the Ming dynasty or the Qing dynasty or whatever, all the way back through civil wars, etc. The War of the Roses. And he says it's one at the top level, overproduction of elites. I'll come back to that. At the bottom level, he basically said it's the immiseration of the proletariat, working class, or the poor. So the immiseration, as in we're just going to really like shit all over you, excuse my language, at the bottom end. And we've got too many people who are intelligent at the top end, too many kind of like seats or whatever, or people who are just like too brainy, and there's just not enough roles for them. And so let's take he uses like the kind of French problems in the kind of 14th century, then the War of the Roses, Agincourt. Then he talks about what happened in kind of the US pre-Civil War. And he says when there's too many elites produced, which he believes happens now via university, where there should be about 7-8% max. If it gets to 10, 12, 15, you're in a world of pain because you've got all these kind of very intelligent people, some going completely left Marxist, some going completely right, basically all right, and you've got chaos. They can all write, they're all intelligent, they're all articulate, they can all voice their opinion. And we've got too many opinions. And at the bottom end, obviously, if you create too much hassle, you have revolts, peasant revolts, you get upcoming revolts, you get unionization, etc. So he said that's where we are now, the immiseration of the poor and the kind of overproduction of elites. And you can argue that many firms, bring it back to us, many firms have kind of created that. We've got so many intelligent people who could really be C-suite, but just don't have the opportunity, or MDs, etc. And we've got basically some people who can't even get on the ladder who definitely you're helping at that level. And when you piss off both, then they're going to create chaos. And the chaos only comes from the elites, really. You rarely get, I mean, when's the last time we had a working class proletariat, use the Marxist term, actually take over a country? Not Lenin, they were all middle class. Not French Revolution, right? They were all middle class. Not
Arab Springs, because couldn't get. I mean, it was a semi-revolt, wasn't it, over in the Middle East and Morocco and things like that, because people couldn't get work. But I see your point. Okay,
yeah,
your
they're
point.
mostly, but driven by mostly the kind of either the army that were pushed out or the elites in the army from different segments who were kind of like still part of the elite, but on the outside. They weren't like the average guy selling stuff on the street. He may have been causing the trouble, but it was really fueled by the guys that, oh, wait a minute, that colonel's taking over from my part, or that political party, because they're part of some religious group, is different from me. So to bring that back to somehow bring it back to FDE and corporate saying, where is the overproduction happening? Well, definitely, unfortunately, at the graduate level, the grad apocalypse. There's an overproduction of grads, whether we like it or not. Not in a bad way, whatever, but compared to you and I going to uni, whatever, and there's just more. At my time, there was like, I don't know, 11%, and that was pushing it, 11%, but we had massive growth in consultancies and Big Four and legal, and money was swishing around the country. We had the breakup of the Soviet Union. There's a lot of stuff going on that brought a lot of money into the country. And so you say at the bottom end, okay, well, we had industries when I was born. We still had like coal industries. We had a bit of steel. We had a lot of stuff going on, car industries. And then for people like me, up and coming, yeah, we had university, which is still 10, 11, 12%. That university is now at 40%, and we've got no industry. So that's the immiseration of the kind of aspiring and the working class. And then we've got way too many people at the high level coming out of universities who can't just. So basically, he's using that scenario of the Brexit, blah, 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 why we have some issues. And then to finish off, most firms, as we've seen with the blocks and the Elons at Twitter, are saying, actually, we've got too many elites here, like it or not.
Yeah. I mean, it's true in that sort of sense, right? Because you've got an overproduction, never-ending source of skills, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got an existing incumbent of skills that sit and reside in your business. That's expensive.
Yeah.
That now has been challenged by a synthetic that isn't as expensive. Okay. And the ability to retain the very top skills, but arm them with a synthetic that could do maybe 2 or 3 other peer jobs, therefore giving you the opportunity to remove. That dumps these people into the open market that is also getting populated by a less experienced skill set that offers companies the choice of paying top dollar experience or molding and paying less. At the moment, people are still paying top dollar, right, and not investing in this side. Hence the grad apocalypse idea. But actually, to ray trace it back even further, I mean, I listened to this argument about the student debt thing the other day, right, where actually, how do we change this? You know, and obviously, this is I don't want to labour too much on this because obviously this is a big topic. And an oversimplified kind of explanation is that do you make it completely free for people, but make the barrier to get into university much higher? You know, where because the sad thing about I think when my brother went to university, it was still very difficult to get into university. I did shit in my A levels, mate, and I still managed in university, and I didn't make anything near what I should have done with my degree, as my brothers have done, right, and stuff like that. So I would look at this and go, I didn't deserve to go, whereas they really did deserve to go, and they made something from it, kind of thing like that. I can only speak for myself on that side, but I don't think I'm the only person, mate. The amount of people that probably went through clearing, all that sort of stuff, it meant then when I was doing graduate recruitment, the number of grads that I'd see is dime a dozen, mate. Being a graduate should be very exclusive, be very difficult to sort of ascertain, should be something that's a real milestone. And I'm not saying that the people today that are graduating aren't those things, but because there's so many of it, it makes it more difficult for us to sort of adjudicate and assess and appraise whether they are, the best in their areas, which then therefore makes it even more difficult for employers to discern, So... we've gone on a massive tangent here, but it got me thinking really about the production versus what's available and how do we manage all this kind of product out there,
Well, I think it's actually not dissimilar to all the other issues that are going on, like the music industry is going through, but it was going through turmoil, and I think it's going to go through another turmoil because people are starting to buy assets up and stuff and publishing. And so maybe we lived in an environment that really only came to fruition in my world post Big Bang, like 86 in the UK, and it lasted to 26. Okay, so that's 40 years, and now we're at the end of that phase, and we're saying, what is the new phase? I was luckily in a phase of university, big law firm at Deloitte, turn yourself into a bank. Bank pays extremely well. It's actually good fun. There was loads of shenanigans going on. It was a good place to be. That was a shit. You've taken a territory and you're able to colonial govern it. It's literally India in 1820 before the chaos kicked off.
Amazing.
It's
yeah.
Brilliant. Now you're at, okay, it's like 1857 and then things are mutinying, people are mutinying and all sorts of kicking off. So like, okay, well, it's a bit rock and roll here now. Things are a bit different. And so I think the world basically has gone through that 40-year cycle, whether it be on Wall Street, the same in the city of London, maybe the same in Tokyo. And now we're in the new phase. And is the new phase the kind of block phase of actually I need 50% of the staff, 40% or 50%, 60%. The Elon phase, I need actually 20% of the staff, but they're all rock stars. What phase is it? And I think to the FDE point, it's like, well, actually, we don't necessarily know what the phase is, but we want to be sitting in the spaceship somewhere, taking you to somewhere out of space. And we don't know what that is, but you need a technician who can understand back to Houston, understand how to navigate space and be able to basically land the rocket somewhere. Don't know if it's Mars, Saturn, or if it's Moon, we're just going to get in it.
Yeah, I think to sort of underline that point, you're right, and that's why these roles are so emerging, because they overlap multiple skill set disciplinary areas, that enable you to do more with fewer,
Yeah.
and you need these kind of rock stars in those kind of positions, because the future is so ambiguous, it's so
Yeah,
unknown at the moment.
totally.
Mate, there are sleeper hits everywhere that we're not seeing just yet. And there
Yeah,
are companies that are so established that are absolutely ingrained in the fabric of almost society that will no longer exist soon.
totally.
This is where we're at, and I would not want to be a betting man right now, to place your bets on this sort of stuff. So,
Well, I'm going to bet on FDEs. That's one bet. Finish that. I'm going to bet FDEs, 10x. And then the question is, okay, who is going to make money out of this? Where are they going to make money? Is it the agency? Is it the recruiting agency to say, well, actually, we're going to do an FDM. We're going to do like 6-month hot housing, kind of potential people coming out of really sexy universities and who are engineers. And we're going to do like communication 6 months and then we're going to farm them out. And so I would see particularly like maybe FDM is about it, but that kind of firm saying, can I afford 10 students, pay them for half a year? They're students, so you can give them 50 grand and they'd be like over the moon in the UK. Give them 50 grand, basically. So we're talking probably a year investment, probably 500k plus training, £1 million. Can we put £1 million on the table and see if we can churn out some FDEs by doing all the things you said, communication, relationship building, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I can see those sort of opportunities. And then people saying, well, FDM can do it. We can do that. We can spunk £1 million. I need to get some venture capital for £1 million, £2 million, £5 million, set up this firm, train some guys and girls. Bob's your uncle. And so I think it's 6 to 10 billion like salary market, and the question is, what can you siphon off that in recruiting fees or agency fees or what have you? That's my pick.
yeah, let's see if we can see a bit of a consolidation of the service, that gets offered. As you're talking, I'm going, your McKinseys, KPMGs of this world, Accentures of this world. I'm going to sit idly by and watch this happen without sort of getting involved. You got all these big recruitment agencies masquerading as SOW, saying that they're these consultancy pieces, right? They're gonna want a piece of this particular pie as well. So, I think we should do this, mate. Is kind of come back to this in the future and see whether we can track the growth of this and see whether how wide we are of this prediction, really.
Okay, so this is the first of our stock market picks. Where would you? We're going to have an index of 25. Say, where would you initially punt this on the index? On your kind of
I think that's a great
grad market. Let's call it grad market cap because we're assuming we take on grad and train them up. On your out of the 25, where's your initial pitch?
Look, I think fairly high. I mean, if I had an ETF basket, this will definitely be involved in it, because for the reasons that we kind of talked about, but because also there are many people who are skill tech. Look, if you think about the four areas they're in there, notwithstanding communication, but technology, learning the tech piece is probably the more harder element of it.
Yeah.
And so if you've got a good pipeline of technologists, software code engineers, etc., who are now coming onto the market and seeing all these things about vibe coding and how AI is going to do this, that, and the other, I think there's going to be a natural deviation towards this area and go, actually, I'm going to learn more about product. I'm going to learn about dealing with customer challenges, etc., because everybody's banging on to me about communication. those areas. I think there's going to be a good growth area. Where it's going to land in that kind of top 20, man, I have no idea, because I don't know what the other 19 roles are just yet that we're going to talk about. But let's give it a punt at the moment. I'd say certainly top 10.
Cool. I'm going to go top 3, and obviously we've got to give a statement, which is this is not career investment advice. Careers can go up and down. Speak to your career advisor if there is any of those. But I'm punting. No, I'm going to punt 2, just in case. Leave 1. I'm going to punt 2 because I think this is a 10 billion market in 2031. This is a 5 billion market, and then by 10 years, it's a 10 billion market. So I'm going to punt number 2.
So hold on, 2031. If I'm a grad now coming out in the market space next year, 2027, I graduate. So it's a 4-year gap. That's probably about right, isn't it? Because it'd be interesting to see the longevity of it in total. But I certainly think in the next sort of 5-year window, this could be huge before it evolves again. Depending on what that kind of looks like. Especially actually if these kind of headless kind of propositions sort of take shape, and there's more of a bespoke nature, and that appetite sort of grows. So yeah, you're probably right, and I'm probably playing it too safe, mate. Cool. Let's come back to it and see. Yeah.
Okay, excellent, mate. Okay, great pod, and we'll speak.
Yeah, man. Let's catch you in the next one.